Now, Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey, member of the House Homeland and Transportation Committees. Congressman, thanks for joining me. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. It's wonderful to have your insight here as we head into the weekend. A long weekend, a lot of folks enjoying their families. An expensive Thanksgiving. We've been talking a lot about inflation, and you can see the politics here. A lot of different folks saying the inflation is to blame from a lot of different directions. Where do you square the blame for inflation?
This is without question the Biden tax. It is just one more tax on everybody. It is because of the terrible way he has led this country in so many ways. And Congressman Jordan is right. When you talk about that Build Back Better bill, which I call the big bad bill, I wish I could get a country western singer to do a song about it. When you talk about that bill and what it's going to do, $2.5 million for tree equity is in it. Tell me what tree equity is. Do we have to have the same amount of trees, the same shape, the same size, the same number? I don't even understand half of what's in that bill. It is a complete waste of money, almost all of it. But that's the way Biden's run everything. The way he dealt with COVID was a way that caused shortages. He didn't work with the small business people. That has created inflation. I'm going to tell you, there's going to be a day in the future for future politicians when they really screw up that it's going to be called, doing a Biden. Because really, that's basically the worst administration and the worst majority in Congress that we have ever had in the history of this nation.
Yeah, you mentioned small businesses. We're heading into a weekend here where hopefully we can all buy a little from those small businesses as we head into our holiday spending. But the New York Times is out with this analysis outlining what it calls Biden's inflation miscalculation. That is complicating his agenda. Quote, from the administration's perspective, the problem is not that there is too much money sloshing around, as Republicans and some economists insist, but the consumers are throwing an unexpectedly large amount of that money at a narrow set of things to buy. Your thought on are consumers to blame, as some seem to be implying here?
Typical of this administration, this Democratic Congress and this president, it's always our fault. COVID's our fault. The inflation's our fault. No, less than a year ago, we didn't have inflation. We were #1 in energy. And by the way, when you just increase energy costs alone more than 30%, what do you think is going to happen? His policy on energy alone causes the inflation. And I think it's shameful.
There are some media outlets that have
regular, individual who's just working and breaking their back.
There are some media outlets that have downplayed inflation in recent weeks, even turning it into a positive or just outright blaming consumers, just squarely blaming them. You see some of the headlines here. Members of Congress even getting in on this. Senator Elizabeth Warren getting kind of torched for this tweet, quoting, wondering why your Thanksgiving grocery costs more this year? Because greedy corporations are charging Americans extra just to keep their stock prices high. Twitter users really digging in on this one, saying, oh, yes, not all caused by you and your buddies spending trillions and causing mass inflation passed to consumers. Quick, everyone, look at the corporate boogeyman. And in a world of bad takes, this one is uniquely horrid. Now, to be fair, Elizabeth Warren, this is really sort of her standard thing. She's big on criticizing corporate America and big corporations. Just your thoughts on the pushback there.
No, that's nonsense. It's stupid. We know the reasons. We know, again, the trillions upon trillions of dollars being spent. Some of it was needed in the beginning when we even did it in a bipartisan way. But again, I'll go back to this bill, this big bad bill, or Build Back, whatever you want to call it, is a terrible bill that has, literally going to hire 80-some thousand IRS agents at $80-some billion. I mean, can you imagine that? That's going to even in itself cause inflation. Things cost more because the people who produce these things are paying more because we're on our knees in front of China. We're not manufacturing and making our own. We don't have a good supply chain. Everything that needs to be done, everything an administration should be right on top of, we are failing at. And that's the reason we have the Biden tax, otherwise known as inflation.
Well, America's certainly paying attention. This has been in all the headlines, and a lot of consumers out there all across America are thinking about if they're going to be able to get what they want at this holiday season. So people are paying attention, and there is an election coming up here. We're about to start talking about the midterms when we head into the new year. Democratic Congresswoman Bernice Johnson of Texas. She recently became the 16th House Democrat to announce that she will not be seeking another term. She has been serving for a long time. She's an iconic, trailblazing figure down there in Texas. But there's been a lot of party infighting over President's social spending bill, and that contributed to her decision. 85 years old, telling local media that the decision was not easy and that some leaders actually asked her to reconsider.
You began to question the why when you get to a point where our party is not as together as you like it to be, like you've experienced.
She is not alone. There are other Democrats that are choosing not to run, too, as we head here, getting closer and closer to the midterms. Your thought on what that says about the Democratic Party right now and what it could mean as Republicans, some Republicans predicting a red wave?
I believe there is going to be a red wave. I don't know how anybody, Republican, Democrat, Independent, could possibly vote for more of this. It's destroying our country, number one. Number two, of course, Democrats are leaving because even if they are progressive Democrats or come from very blue districts, they know they still have to explain it. Let's understand, we're talking about inflation, we're talking about high gas prices, we're talking about no supply chain. That affects districts of every party. It affects districts of every socioeconomic breakdown. So whether you're wealthy, middle class, or poor, you're paying more, and it really affects people who are not as, that are poor, in plain English. And so how do you go to those people and say, I'm really doing a good job for you, even though you can't afford it costs as it is, and now everything is even more expensive? That doesn't even sell to poor people. I don't think they want to make that explanation. I don't think they want to have to explain why the president is screwing everything up. I don't think they do want to have to explain why less than a year ago everything is fine and everything is in complete disarray now. I don't care what party you are. You may try to say it's good if you're a Democrat. Down deep inside, you know it's not.
As we head when it's shifting a little bit away from the economy, we've had this fascinating election season. Everyone's trying to read the tea leaves. But there's been some argument that Democrats aren't listening to those suburban voters, those independent voters that are really what sways an election, particularly in some of these critical swing states. So not that you want to give advice to the other side of the aisle, but how do you find a place where people that are running for office listen to those voters that they're trying to get to vote for them?
Let's be clear, and I think some Congress people forget that. We work for the people. The people don't work for us, number one. Number two, even in Congresswoman Johnson's case, she's retiring, but she, gives her approval for Jasmine Crockett, who is one of the people in Texas in the state legislature that ran away when they had a difficult issue and went to another state. So even though that might be okay in her district, when people from other more moderate, normal districts take a look at this, suburban districts, they're going to say, that's not good. I'm not going to vote, Democrat, because we want people that are going to stay there and make sure to do the right thing. And if they need to, oppose the president and make sure that we get back on track. We need to get back on track. We need strong, good leaders who are willing to do that. And I think these folks are afraid. If I was to give them advice, I would say, try to get back to the middle, listen to the few remaining moderates that you have in your party, and they're going away. Make no mistake.
Congressman, you're steering me down in all politics is local discussion, but we're running out of time. I really appreciate you joining us here on this day after Thanksgiving. Congressman Jeff Van Drew, thanks for your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.